meteorologist Erica Martin with Weather Co-op, where weather meets community, and I am so excited. I have Tracy back in the studio today, and we are talking the impact of hurricane season on finance. Hello, Tracy. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Erica. So excited to be here with you talking about weather and finance.
Oh my gosh, you're so good at it. That's why. And you're always so insightful. Can you give us some insight into the overall, I guess, quick and dirty impact of Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton on the economy, possibly globally?
Yeah, so huge, really huge, right? So Milton was that 1 in 1,000 year storms, right? So although Helene potentially has even had greater impact just because of the flooding that was left behind. It was much more extensive than Milton. And so already for Helene, the federal assistance just from the government has surpassed $286 million already, with an additional 180 million that's already been allocated for the recovery. There's
Mm.
been 7,000 personnel been deployed. They've shipped 16 million meals and 13 million liters of water already. Like it's crazy.
It's so extensive, like the fiscal impact, right? In so
Hmm.
many ways. So when you break it down that way, do you see this being a huge strain on the global economy? I mean, from a meteorological perspective, I do, but I always see everything in weather, right? Where you see everything in numbers. Like, how do you see this, or have you seen anything similar impact us in the past like this?
Um, Not this big, right? Like I
Mhm.
said, it's that 1 in 1,000 storms.
Mhm.
Um, the insurance estimates already are over $1 billion from each.
Mhm.
And, we're still just recently into it, right? Like some people, like our corporate office, actually, the corporate office of the company that I work with is in Asheville. Well, it was
Mm.
in Asheville, I should say, because it's no
Wow.
longer
Okay.
there. It got annihilated, really. So,
No.
hmm
I'm so
yeah,
sorry. Wait, are you so what happens now? Everybody just works from home?
yeah, everybody's working from home now, right now.
Well, and
So,
this is so interesting because this is something you were warning us about since last year, really, when we started all
hmm
working together. You were really giving us the kind of you weren't being grim, you were just being factual, and now you're seeing this all come to pass. So, do you feel like do you have any other insight for us as we move ahead in seasons?
yeah, I mean, it was very interesting that these two storms crossed the same path as the one last year, right? Which
Mhm.
is not the usual path for these storms to happen. So it is interesting that they're crossing further and further south,
Mhm.
across Florida. And, potentially as the temperatures change in the ocean, that's going to become more and more prevalent. So,
Yeah,
I
Tracy, the
think,
temperatures they were actually quite sad. Some people were reporting upper 80s. I mean, they were clearly in the low 90s. And with Milton, I think one of the bigger stories was that the genesis was in the Western Pacific, really,
right,
right? So, or in the Eastern Pacific, moving into right the Western Gulf and then
right.
migrating eastward, right? So that one was tricky because it was like all eyes were on everything else happening right around the Caribbean, or
Hmm.
like the Lesser Antilles, and then all of a sudden Milton scoots on over from the Pacific and then beelines it and kind of sits in the Western Gulf for a while and almost found
Right.
the path of least resistance. But to your point, sea surface temperatures, and that's pretty interesting. I think you and I both. I think the entire weather co-op team we're always mindful of using those terms and stuff, but you can't really
Right.
help saying that like there definitely is an anomalous sea surface temperature pattern. And as we think about La Nina and the fact that now we're seeing a very weak La Nina, it seems
Hmm.
like there definitely is something happening with that warming pattern.
Right. And we don't know, whether that's a temporary pattern or a permanent
Right.
pattern so we just see
Yeah.
that there is a pattern right now, and this is what happens as the result of that pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
unfortunately.
because the Earth is so old, we're just like we have to give it its like grace, where it's like, okay, it's over 4 billion years old. We understand we've had different like geological time frames. I just think
Mhm.
that this one, because now we're, we have a lot of, it's a populous nation and a populous world. I think it's just we have to be more aware. So all in all, with the insurance agencies, I think this is something we've always talked about as well. I mean, what do you recommend for people now?
Yeah, I mean, you need to have insurance, right?
Right.
Because things like this are happening more and more. And, a lot of people go, oh, it's not going to happen to me. But if you if you live nearly anywhere these days, something invariably is going to happen at some point. So
Yeah.
you need to be prepared. And so, yes, you can self-insure, but what that means is you have to have the money there available to pay for your own recovery, right? Because yes, the government is, helping in terms of having disaster relief. So, for example, they're making available interest-free loans to people to help bridge them over until insurance comes through. If you're a business, or if you're impacted like that. Also, they're making Social Security available to people.
Mhm.
Unemployment if if you've lost if your job is no longer there because of the impact. But all of that has to come from somewhere too, right? Like even if we look at the government debt, right
Yeah.
now the debt repayments are more than our GDP in the US, which means that now they're paying out more money in support support, right, in assistance, and that's going to put even more strain on that as well. So they're going to have more money to cover that, and where is that money going to come from? So they've either got to borrow that from internationally, or they've got to print it,
Mm.
and
No, keep
both
it,
of
Pat. Don't give
both
him
of
any
those.
ideas, Tracy. I think they are printing happy. They love to print. I'm like,
Oh
gotta
yeah,
back it up a little bit.
they love
Um,
to print, but the
but
problem is that, when that happens, there's a finite amount of value, right? Like
it's like
GDP
an
is,
inkjet printer. You only have so much print. Like you run out eventually. But Tracy, that's interesting. So I guess this is especially because your particular company was impacted, and like just really
mm,
seeing this, I just feel like people need to be aware, be insured, but is it almost like it's not promised?
yeah. I mean, what do you mean by not promised? Sorry.
Meaning that like if there over two is like there's $1 billion in like insurance claims, over a billion, right?
Hmm.
Or whatever. You just said
Yeah.
like you can't, and if there's more going out than coming in, um
Yeah, so
where is that?
insurance is different than the government, right? So because, the insurance companies even here, a lot of them are, owned or have parent companies that are internationally, and
Okay.
insurance companies also insure themselves,
Right.
right? So what happens is when you take out insurance with an insurance company, they then reinsure themselves against that loss with somebody else,
Uh-huh.
right? So there's that you're actually better off with insurance than trying to depend on, assistance and support from the government, to be honest. And when
She did not say she said that. We'll censor that.
yes,
But
go
hey,
ahead.
you know what? Tracy Lipnicki is she's telling the truth right now. Like this is why you're on Weather Co-op, because you really want to have a gauge of, she's just being really honest. Like you do want to have the insurance, but you also just keep in mind, right, that
Mhm.
right now there's probably a delay, right?
There is a delay. And so that's why the government is stepping in to help with those loans, right? Because it can take, you know, 30 days or longer. And in instances like this, right, where it is large sums, the insurance companies obviously want to make sure that they're paying it out to the right people, because the other issue is that there can often be fraud, right?
Oh,
Even
no. Oh yeah.
even
This is like the prime time to do that, right? For people, like people who have like
yeah.
nefarious intentions. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, and in Florida too, there are companies that put themselves up and go around and, say, oh, you need a new roof, when they wouldn't necessarily, and they say, we'll put in the claim to your insurance for you, and then they overinflate the price in order to get that insurance claim, so there are people that
Do that.
unfortunately are, yeah, do that. And
You're like waiting. It's like, so that's
yeah,
interesting. It's like an ambulance chaser attorney.
yeah,
So when that happens, like there's really no way to track that, right? Like if somebody's just being like unethical about it. And that
yeah. I
does
mean, that's
pick up the prices of things.
it does, right? It increases the cost of your insurance. It also inflates the cost of the work because it's kind of there's less resources available. So there's a lot of onflowing issues from that, which obviously increases the insurance premiums. But that's also why the insurance companies take their time more because they want to go and they send assessors to go and check and make sure it is, a valid claim as well. But that delays how long it takes for them to get out to you because even after last year, like I was my in-laws live in Florida as well, just near where my father-in-law lost his part of his roof last year.
Uh-huh.
And I was there not so long ago, just a couple of months ago. I wasn't there last week, thank goodness.
Thank
But
goodness.
there were still roofs that were being repaired from last year, right? That the insurance hadn't had a chance to get
Right.
around and
Wow.
do them yet.
They didn't
So,
even have a chance to assess that.
correct.
Wow. Well, Tracy Lipnicki of the Lipnicki Agency. We're going to drop all her information in the bio. You guys know her. We're going to go ahead and sign off quickly, but we'll be back. We have another question for Tracy, and she's always giving us the inside scoop. So I think the key word is patience, right? Everybody's just going to have to be
Yeah.
patient. And, I
Mhm.
think just hang tight and you can always contact Tracy. She's got a wealth of information and she does travel between Australia and the US often. So she's always
Yeah.
available and she's always available on Zoom. So you can feel free to contact her. We're going to sign off. I'm Erica Martine with Weather Co-op where weather meets community. We will be back though, but that was a really great, I think, wealth of knowledge. So thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Eric.